Welcome to Remarkable Retail Podcast, our last episode of Season 11 in the crazy year that was 2025. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm Steve Dennis.
On this special bonus episode, part 2 of what is consistently one of the most popular episodes of the year, and proving that with our numbers from part 1, the year in predictions review, where we review Steve's bold predictions for 2025 and grade them. So no news this episode, and we won't be talking this week in Remarkable or talking what's on our radar screen. We won't be talking about that other than talking about a nice turkey dinner coming up in the LeBlanc household until 2026 and January 13th, to be precise. Now, if you're going to be at NRF, we hope to see you. We'll be recording several episodes of our dedicated podcast studio on the show floor, sponsored by Narvar. Stay tuned to LinkedIn for more information on that and what we'll be up to. And as you sort through on LinkedIn all that AI crap pollution in your feed, what did Seth Godin call it, Steve? I think he called it the enshittification of LinkedIn. But anyway, that's the best thing we have.
He did not come up with that term. It's actually a book by somebody whose name I'm now forgetting. But anyway, yes, there is lots of crap out there.
One of our many, many excellent guests in 2025. But wait, loyal and new listeners, that's not all. Before we dig into what and how you did the second half of your annual retail predictions, let's talk briefly about two things, Steve. Your top secret visit to Amazon in Seattle, as well as your take on the brand new Netflix house right around the corner from you. So you were in Seattle. I'm in Vancouver. If anybody's watching on YouTube, you might see the mountains. We swapped positions, so to speak. I'm in rainy Vancouver. You were in rainy Seattle. Tell us about your trip to Seattle and what say the folks what say the great folks at Amazon?
Well, yeah, it was a pretty fun and interesting trip. But yes, I had to survive the atmospheric river. So this was an event, first time that Amazon has had a grocery analyst day. I don't know that I necessarily consider myself a grocery analyst, but I guess I'm an analyst, and this was about grocery, and it was actually a day and a half. But it was pretty good. I won't go into too much detail for a whole bunch of reasons. You may see that some of the folks that were there have posted some information, some recaps on LinkedIn. So several of our friends, Jason Goldberg, Neil Saunders, who've both been on the pod, Zach Stambor from Insider Intelligence, eMarketer, who probably should come on the pod sometime. We've had a couple of his colleagues on. So it's, I think, 12 or 13 of us. And first day basically were executive briefings about Amazon's grocery business. So started pretty high up on the echelon with Doug Harrington, who runs the entire retail business across the globe. And we also heard from Jason Beekle, who listeners will know was on the podcast a few weeks back. He is over all of Amazon grocery worldwide, as well as the CEO of Whole Foods Market, but also folks that run the private brand operation, quality control, supply chain, and technology. So really was a ton of really, really interesting information. I think what they were mostly trying to convey were a few things. This one grocery vision. So part of that is bringing together the Whole Foods Market side of the house with the existing Amazon grocery business. So most of that is online, of course, but they also have the Amazon Fresh stores, Amazon Go, so some physical retail. They wanted to talk about the capabilities they are leveraging and building, the size and the strength of the business already. So just one fun fact there, which some folks may have already seen. Amazon has been talking about how they already do over $100 billion in grocery. So as much as people might say, well, Amazon's not really that big a grocery player, and they just have Whole Foods, which is kind of small. Well, that's a pretty big number. That by itself, not including Whole Foods Market, is much bigger than the vast, vast majority of retailers of any kind. I think that is a bigger number than our friends at Costco do with their Kirkland private brand and all the things that they have. So that's pretty impressive and growing quite quickly. But a lot of the two other main things I think they were stressing was their growth plans and some of their initial traction in perishables. So if you think about most of what Amazon sells online, it's really ambient, shelf-stable type of products, more essentials, not frozen food, not refrigerated food, not produce, et cetera, to any large degree so far. That is the big opportunity, and that's a lot of what they talk to us about, expanding those capabilities, what it's going to take to really grow there. They are doing some testing, which seems to be going pretty well so far on a relatively small basis. Overall, they continue to push, as Amazon's been doing for probably since the beginning of their business, pushing on convenience, more and more markets having same-day delivery, narrowing the delivery windows, increasing that speed, testing 30-minute delivery in some places. So I think we're going to hear a lot more about the race to the doorstep that is going on there as well. The other thing that really struck me, and we spent some time on the second day over at their test kitchens and where they do product development, and the private brand offering, or I should say private brands offering, because you've got Whole Foods with 365, some Whole Foods branded things, but also Amazon Grocery and other private brands. Quite impressive. So that was really fun to see. We tasted some products, got a little sense of how they do the quality control and packaging and product development. So it was really impressive. I think maybe the last thing I'll just say, which was a bit of some confusion, I think actually I had coming out of our interview with Jason Beekle, was whether or not there might be some homogenization, I think is the word. Yeah, homogenization. Mm-hmm. I know I can say bifurcation, but homogenization.
Homogeneity? I don't know.
Yeah, homogeneity. But whether, and I've seen some other stories about this, so not only was I confused, but I have seen some reporting that was suggesting that perhaps Whole Foods was going to move more towards the middle and maybe kind of blend a little bit more with the Amazon Fresh or whatever the physical, the other kind of physical manifestation might look like. And Jason was quite clear that Whole Foods is going to be maintained as a premium brand. Not that there isn't an evolution to it, but that is their premium brand offering. They're committed to keeping that separate, while this One Grocery vision is much more about leveraging capabilities across the different grocery offerings. So anyway, and Whole Foods, I guess I said one more thing, but I guess it's related. Whole Foods did have a really good year last year. I think we've commented on that a few times. They've been up about 9%, which is quite a bit better than the average grocery store for sure. And I think a lot of that has to do with better execution, but they have been strengthening their price position, having a stronger offering in essentials, and just kind of testing a bunch of things. So that seems to be going pretty well, and they're continuing to open Whole Foods stores pretty aggressively. So I don't think there is. I think it's pretty clear there's no tapping the brakes there, or no attempt to really merge different concepts into kind of one Uber concept.
All right. Well, let's move on to the new Netflix house in Dallas at the Galleria. You visited, yes?
So I'm going to give this will be, I guess, maybe part one or initial impressions, which will become obvious why in a second. But yeah, the new Netflix house opened on December 11th. This is location number 2. The first opened at the King of Prussia Mall about a month ago now. Interestingly, I think, and I touched on this, I think when we teased this, both of these stores are in former department store anchor locations at a regional mall. So this particular location was originally a Saks Fifth Avenue, then it was a Belk department store, now it is a Netflix house. So it's 2 levels adjacent to the mall, right next to Nordstrom, down the way from Macy's. The concept is a mix of a few different things. So part of it is featuring merchandise that's related to Netflix properties, so based on some of their shows, Stranger Things, K-pop Demon Hunters, etc. Probably, I don't know, I didn't count up, but 10 or 12 different of their media properties have some sort of merch associated with it. There's a game arcade where the games are also based upon Netflix properties. There's a quite large cafe, Netflix Bites. And then, so that's the top floor. The bottom floor is 2 featured experiences. Which this is the reason why I say this is preliminary. I did not go to either one of these experiences, primarily because they were sold out. But they're each, I think, about 30 to 45 minutes. I don't quite understand what happens. There's a little bit of information on the website. It seems to be similar to maybe some of the features you'd see at a Disney World, that kind of experience. So the one that happens, or the two that happen to be in Netflix House Dallas, are based on Stranger Things and Squid Games. I forget the other two that are at King of Prussia, but they're different. My overall headline so far, my takeaway is, I think there's a there, but I did not find this to be particularly well executed. The layout is very confusing, terrible wayfinding, weird lighting, a lot of visual clutter, like so many different things going on that it is hard to know where to go. And it is also hard from a merchandise perspective. Like, I kind of expected you'd walk in and then you would see quite obviously, this is where the Stranger Things merch is. This is where the K-pop Demon Hunters merch. And it's very hard to figure out. Now, I don't know if they're trying to get you to wander around, but I think they're missing some visual merchandising 101 when it comes to the merchandising area. The arcade area is just some games. Like, I'm not into that so much, but that seemed kind of underwhelming. The cafe seemed fine, but nothing to me was really super well done and was not as cohesive as I would have expected. Now, they're not planning to open, at least at the moment, they're not planning to open number 3 until 2027. I don't think we have an exact date for that, whether it's early in the year, mid-year, towards the end of the year, and that's going to be in Las Vegas. So they have some time to learn from both of these experiences, and I do think there's lots of potential there. I went on a Tuesday afternoon. It's not exactly peak time. It was pretty busy. More people. I took a rough count. There were more people in the Netflix store than there were in the Macy's. So make of that what you will. So, stay tuned. I mean, the reason why I think this is interesting is I do think it's a logical kind of thing. This blending between media and retail is interesting. Obviously, we've seen this with Disney and others for forever. The potential, because it's a pretty good size space, makes sense on 2 or 3 levels. Opportunity to go into former mall anchors with obviously a big brand name with something new. I'm sure they're getting lots of interest from mall developers already. They're probably saying, "Hey, slow down, wait, we're not ready." But this is the kind of thing I think that could make a really interesting anchor revision or revitalization to some malls. Mall developers, as I'm sure many of our listeners will know, they're always interested in something new and exciting. And Netflix is obviously quite new and exciting to see this. Great traffic driver, works well from a day part standpoint. So I imagine they would get some pretty sweetheart deals. So the economics of this could be pretty interesting. I mean, I don't know enough about the ticket sales kind of stuff, but if you can get the cafe to work, you get the merch to work, you could have a pretty good box here. But yeah, as I say, I think they got a little bit of work to do. But I think this will be, maybe not a real story to revisit until 2027, given we won't know what the next iteration of this is going to look like for a little while.
All right. Well, without further ado, and there's been much ado, let's get to the main content of the show, which is the remaining predictions. And we're going to stay in the same neighborhood as that we're just talking about with department stores. So your seventh prediction was department stores keep running to stand still. Talk about it and talk about your evaluation. And that's just the format we're going to go through for those of you who are new to the format. So kick it off. Number 7, department stores.
Yeah, well, anybody who's followed my work, this probably will shock nobody in terms of the predictability of the predictability of the prediction. And again, remind everybody kind of where we were a year ago in terms of what was out in the ether and what was the discussion, that there was quite a lot of excitement, I guess, about the revitalization plan at Macy's. JCPenney was talking about opening more stores. Saks and Neiman's were just combined. So it was quite a lot going on. New leader coming into Kohl's. So quite a lot of possibilities for revitalization. But overall, I would say what I sometimes call the stall at the mall, though Kohl's is not in a mall, hasn't happened. The setup for this, and if you go back to read my Forbes piece and some other things that I posted, was I think the department stores have really been the poster child for what I call the curse of the timid transformation. It's part of the content in last year's book, Leaders Leap. And I think a lot of this is really mostly about the business model, that the business model is running out of gas, but there are clearly executional issues that could improve performance, and we're seeing a little bit of that. But my overall prediction was that comps were likely to remain negative. Profitability would not be really turned around, I guess. And so therefore continuing market share loss. I also said that I thought store closings would accelerate, though I did not put a specific number on that. So overall, I would give myself an A-. There have been pockets of improvement, most notably Bloomingdale's, which has put up pretty solid above average numbers all year. So Bloomingdale's, as many would know, is part of Macy's. Kohl's and JCPenney are declining less, but still remain negative. Saks Global, so Saks Fifth Avenue, Neiman Marcus, significantly negative. Macy's and Dillard's are essentially flat, slight comp increases towards the end of the year, but both are indicating that the final quarter of the year is probably going to be flat at best. So they're continuing to lose relative market share, and profitabilities remain fairly elusive. So overall, I would say a lot of just treading water at best, in some cases really continuing to lose ground. Now, the one thing I would say that I missed is there really hasn't been much acceleration in store closings. For the most part, the stores that closed, with the exception of a couple of Neiman Marcus stores that got announced, were Macy's, and Macy's had already announced those. So they are rationalizing their store portfolio. So I wouldn't say there's been any major change. We'll see what happens early next year. As you would know, many of our listeners would know, there's often a store rationalization process that happens right after the holiday. Now, I did have, so if folks haven't listened to last week's episode, I also sprinkled in some wild cards. And so wild card number 3 in my predictions was that Kohl's would become part of Catalyst Brands. Now, Catalyst Brands is the parent company of JCPenney. My logic was that Kohl's and JCPenney go after a very similar customer with a pretty similar business model. It's just that JCPenney is mostly on the mall, Kohl's is mostly off the mall. And as they continue to lose revenue, perhaps there is an opportunity to put them together, rationalize costs, close some overlapping locations, which would help the productivity of the remaining stores. Well, anyway, that didn't happen. I wouldn't say there was any serious rumor that that was going to happen. Even when I wrote this wildcard prediction, I said, well, maybe this is a better 2026 prediction. Perhaps now it's a better 2027 because of just, various things that are going on. So anyway, that is I don't even know if I score the wild cards as a grade. It just either happened or it didn't. And this definitely didn't happen. Yep. And I'm not expecting this is going to happen in the immediate future. And
a reminder to the audience, the wild cards are kind of the way out there predictions. So, yes, right. It's fair that we don't grade them because it's just like, hey, this could be exciting, but it's not exactly what you would predict to happen. But it's kind of fun and how do we describe it? An educated guess or an educated prediction, so to speak.
An educated wild-ass guess, mostly. But yeah.
An educated wag. Let's move on to number 8. Now, there is no question there were changes at Target, but you had thought there were going to be big changes at Target. Talk about your observations and how you graded your prediction.
Yeah, so I had a core prediction here and then a wild card, which I'll get to. So, yeah, big changes at Target. What I was really getting at was both leadership, that I thought there was a good chance that Brian Cornell would be forced out. He's been at the helm for a number of years. Performance has been terrible for the last several years, so I thought he might get pushed out. I also thought that something had to happen with Target's partnership with Ulta, because that seemed to be underperforming as well, and Ulta didn't seem to be super happy about it. I don't think I knew at the time there was going to be a new CEO, but anyway, I can't remember the timing of that. And I also thought that Target would probably close some stores, just given the underperformance. So I got most of this right. Brian Cornell is not out, but there is a new CEO coming in. I guess he's maybe started officially already. Cornell is sticking around, however, as executive chairman. The Ulta deal is over. Ulta is departing. So I got that right. But not only have there not been any store closings, I mean, there may have been a couple just, because of leases expiring or what have you. But if anything, Target seems to be doubling down on their stores. They were going to continue to expand. They are putting some capital in, which was something I thought, they needed to do. That wasn't really part of the prediction. So I would give myself a B plus here, mostly getting the operational retrenchment wrong. And I did not think if Cornell was going to be out that he would still be hanging around in a largely ceremonial job on. And I don't think that's a good idea. I think we covered that on a prior episode. So, but wild card number 4 was that Target would go private or possibly get acquired. And again, this is an easy one to say, did it happen or did it not? It did not happen. So I got that wrong. I will mention, though, a late in the year prediction from our friend Chris Walton, who is also a former Target executive. He has predicted that Amazon will acquire Target. So I don't know if he's officially doing 2026 predictions, but that's kind of interesting. Believe it or not, we did not discuss that when I was out at Amazon. I did joke around.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Yeah. Well, I did joke around with one of our colleagues who shall go nameless. I said, so are you willing to ask Doug if they're going to acquire Target? And this fella said, well, why don't you do that? And I said, no, I'm pretty sure we're not going to get an answer to that, and we might get kicked out. So anyway, but if any kind of deal for Target, whether it's a go private deal or an acquisition, would be a very large deal, $50-60 billion. It's a little bit more affordable because the stock went down something like 30% so far this year. So, but yeah, it would be a big deal whether it would get through the Justice Department, depending on who the acquirer was. I think that is a big question. But anyway, we're not doing 2026 predictions yet. So who knows? Maybe that will make it on my list. I haven't finished those yet.
Stay tuned for that, and stay tuned for our in-person virtual tour, so to speak. You and I are planning to visit the new Target store, or the refreshed Target store in Soho in New York during the big show, which is making some buzz. They put some money into that, and it looks pretty fun. So we'll be there, as probably many of the people listening are going to go check it out. Let's talk about number 9, store closings to exceed store opening counts. Again,
I'm sure, just to alienate our younger listeners, you will be playing the Beatles clip, number 9. Anyway, deep cuts here, folks.
Deep cuts. We're all about the deep cuts here.
That's right. So last year, store closings exceeded store openings, which is, kind of funny in a way. I mean, obviously, I made a bit of a career about saying physical retail isn't dead. Boring retail is. But with all this talk about physical retail being back, and I think both you and I say, well, it never really left. But with all this talk about how, Gen Z loves stores, all this traffic going back to stores, there are a lot of store closings still going on, and store closings for, I think it's now 3 straight years, have exceeded openings. So my particular prediction was that was going to be a case again this year. I also, though, said that I thought, and I love our friends at Coresight Research, they predicted that store closings would double, which would get them to about 15,000. I said that I didn't think there would be nearly that many, that I thought the number would be closer to 10,000. Well, gauntlet down, Deb Weinswig, because the actual number looks to be, from your own data, as of 12/5, the number of store closings in the United States was just over 8,100. And the number of store openings was just over 5,000. So yes, store closings, unless something really crazy happens here in the next week, store closings will easily increase or be greater than store openings, but the number will be under 10,000. So even I overestimated that. So now, and just for a little bit of flavor, I mean, a lot of the store closings, of course, come from some of the bigger chains that went bankrupt or really got into trouble. So there's a lot of drugstores. I mean, the drugstore business has really been challenged. So many hundreds there. Mid-level grocery stores been rationalizing their fleets quite a lot because that business is kind of stuck in the collapse of the middle kind of thing. Joann's, Fabrics, went bankrupt. Party City, Claire's, Big Lots. It's typically these large chains that have really gotten into trouble and either completely closing or really doing a wholesale closings. On the opening side, it's really the categories that have been hot for multiple years. Dollar stores, hard discount chains like Aldi, off-price like TJX. Convenience stores keep opening, of all, whether it's 7-Eleven or Couche-Tard. There's just a lot of convenience stores that continue to open. And then, you really don't have too many what I would call, hotter, newer concepts that are opening a lot of stores. Warby Parker is really the outlier there, and I think they opened about 50. And then, you've got the On Running and the Vuori, but, those kinds of places. But they're opening like 8, 9. It's not huge numbers, and they're not huge square footage. So that doesn't really change the complexion of leasing terribly.
What do you give yourself as a grade?
Oh, yeah, I guess I skipped over that. A-. The only reason I didn't give myself an A is, if I said more like 8,000 instead of 10,000, I would have gotten the A.
You'd be right on. All right. Let's move on to number 10, which is Amazon. We've been talking about Amazon off the top of the show. So you bring a bit of context to this evaluation. You said that their grocery dreams remain sleepy.
Yeah. Now, in retrospect, what I should have done is made it clear that I think from the way I wrote this, if you read the Forbes piece, it's clear I'm talking about physical retail because as we talked about at the top, the online part of this is growing very, very nicely, and they are clearly investing in that. But what I was trying to get at here was that the Amazon Fresh concept did not seem to be ready for prime time. It was not clear to me that particular, even the latest iteration of it, or a couple of different things they're trying, really went after enough white space and was different enough to be something they would invest behind. And that seems to be very much the case. There was no news broken when we were out in Seattle about plans to open dozens or hundreds of stores. I think it's been reported by others that there are several locations that looked like they were ready to open that have not opened. So I think I absolutely nailed this one. And I'll give myself an A-. And notwithstanding what I said about, this was really meant to be about physical retail. It's definitely not true for their online part. And, maybe eventually it will be about physical retail. But the other thing I should have included, this was more really centered on the whole Amazon Fresh offering, but Whole Foods Market, I will say, has done better than I thought they would have done this year. So to make this a more comprehensive prediction, I should have commented a little bit more about Whole Foods Market. And I think had I done that, I would have said that it's fine, but it's not something they're really going to go wild about it. But they are continuing to invest and expand behind Whole Foods Market. So I have to, even though it was vague about the prediction, trying to have a little bit of integrity here and said I should have been clearer. And had I been clearer, I would have graded myself a little bit lower. So that's an A-. So here's another wild card. And I have to say, I did really terribly on the wild cards. My last wild card prediction, number 5, was that Amazon might make another grocery acquisition, I guess C above Target. I wasn't necessarily specifically talking about Target, though. That was in the back of my mind. This obviously clearly didn't happen, though. As we record this, there are still a few good shopping days ahead. So perhaps just like Saks Global closed when we said they wouldn't right before the end of the year, perhaps there'll be breaking news. But as we record this, and doesn't seem like that's very likely to happen. And they certainly had a great poker face when we were out there in Seattle if they were about to announce some big acquisition.
They probably would not tell you that.
Probably, they absolutely would not have told us.
It was part of our question roadmap for Jason, because we said in a very broad context, you don't lack resources to grow. So clearly you're thinking about other things, and that was kind of a nudge to say, you just go buy Kroger, or buy Target or whoever. I mean, you've got the money. So that was how we were trying to get around that acquisition piece. Speaking of buying people, let's make a deal.
Yeah. So here, it's kind of 2 levels to this prediction. One was that I thought the deal market broadly would really heat up. But more specific to retail, I thought the retail deal market would heat up. And it is true that the broader market for IPOs and acquisitions has increased quite a lot this year over last year. But specific to retail, not a lot of activity. At the time I wrote this prediction, I thought that Shein might go public. I thought Viore might go public. I thought Catalyst Brands might go public, as well as, a few other companies. I thought there was definitely an opportunity, or it was likely that some of the digitally native vertical brands would get acquired, whether that was Away or Glossier or Allbirds or, who knows. But I just thought that with interest rates coming down, which, they haven't come down as much, so that might be part of the explanation. But I just thought there would be interest on the part of some bigger companies to pick up some very well-known names, but not necessarily companies that are making a ton of money, and they could create this synergy opportunity, and that would make the deal work. But really, there have not been any significant deals that I'm aware of. Maybe there's something I'm missing, but at least the ones I had top of mind, those did not happen. I also thought there might be some continued activist activities towards companies like Macy's, like Kohl's, maybe even a Victoria's Secret. And that really hasn't happened either. Some rumblings, but nothing significant. And it's particularly surprising because so many of these, well, not so many of these, but several of these department stores in particular have seen their stocks come down quite a lot. So if you liked them as an activist a year and a half ago, you would think you like them even more as their prices have come back. So, but some of the more recent news has sent them up a little bit. But anyway, net of this is yes from the broader market, but pretty much a whiff on the retail side. So I would give myself a gentleman's C or a gentleman's C minus, even if I really want to be clear. So.
All right, we are at the last one, the 12th prediction. Retailers brace for the Ozempic recession. This is a very interesting one. I was with you 100%. I got my own thoughts on this that I've been hearing in the food industry, but talk about your observations this year about what happened in Ozempic and retail and grocery.
Well, in part one of the things I alluded to was needing to do a better job. And I've said this now for several years, so obviously I'm not learning very quickly, to be able to figure out how I'm going to grade myself on this. So in some cases where something happened or didn't, that's really easy, right? Or when I can look at, gee, did Macy's have a comp increase or not? But here it's a little more vague. But the essence of this prediction was that with the growth of GLP-1 drugs and the impact they have, not just in terms of losing weight, but changing the amount that people eat and the kinds of things they eat, this would have a significant ripple effect. Now, in retrospect, I also shouldn't have said recession, because I think in the case of the food industry, and you can speak to this a little bit more here in a second, I think it's pretty clear from lots of data that the amount that people eat and what they're eating is having pretty significant impact on grocers and restaurants. Maybe negative, but, because it changes the mix of products, there may be more margin opportunity there. So maybe you can comment on that in a second. But the reason why I say I shouldn't have picked recession is I think it's actually been a little bit of a renaissance for the apparel industry, because we're seeing the apparel business, and only, again, I can't draw a completely straight line between the overperformance of apparel this year and specifically to say a lot of that are people buying different sizes as opposed to other things that just cause people to spend more money on apparel. But I got to think it's there, and there's enough anecdotal evidence to suggest that's true. So that's not a recession. That's actually positive. So anyway, I gave myself a B+, but because I feel pretty strongly that it is happening, but I could not tie a lot of specific data to be able to quantify this. And I do think there's a big difference between what's going on with CPG, grocery, restaurants versus apparel, accessories, and other things that would relate to people losing quite a bit of weight. So anyway, I don't know. You have anything to add from your being closer to the grocery business than I?
Yeah, a couple of interesting things. I mean, one of the other big impacts we thought was QSR, fast food kind of places. And they have been impacted, but interestingly, they've been in some areas positively impacted as people look for more protein and they go for more protein shakes. So again, to your point earlier about just what you eat is changing. And we're seeing that in grocery stores where people are looking for, CPG companies, more craveability, but different craveability. So there's shifts within consumption. And I guess the last thing where there is absolutely impact, and this is on both the industry and restaurants, is on alcohol. So the consumption of alcohol has been on a many year decline in North America, if not, and Europe, around the world. So that's just been accelerated. And as we know, restaurants make a lot of their margin on that glass or that bottle of wine that you split. And so restaurants have a margin challenge because it's not easily replaceable. Some look for coffee, for example, or other non-alcoholic beverages. It's a hard substitute. So, I think some industries, not surprisingly, with such a broad-based impact on society, are winning, and some are losing, and the rest are all trying to figure it out. So that's where, I hear the questions many times in the grocery and food industry. That's for sure.
You raised a good point that I think just mentioned briefly. I do think, and I think we had this conversation when I talked about my predictions in the beginning of the year. There's a difference in the volume shift and the profitability shift, right? So if you're buying more blueberries instead of Ben & Jerry's ice cream, first of all, different providers of that product, right? Not the same company, right? So like Unilever doesn't benefit from people going to buy blueberries instead of Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Grocers may have a different feeling about that in terms of their margin, in terms of traffic driving. And so I think it's really interesting, and I don't really have a good view as to how this is all going to play out, but I think it's really starting to become quite significant, and presumably even more significant as we go ahead as new and different drugs come on, and there's a pill version, and perhaps more insurance coverage, and the prices come down. And I guess I would say, as I just recap on the year on predictions, I did pretty well, my core predictions, but I'm hanging my head in shame. I thought I'd at least get one or two of those wild card predictions at least somewhat right. But man, I was just I feel like 2025 was so focused on getting around figuring out the future of tariffs that it crowded out all that other wild card type of activity. Should we buy somebody? Should we close? Should we do this? How are we going to get through tariffs? I imagine dominated the discussion across many boardrooms in retail and grocery is so. Perhaps that led to to a suboptimal outcome on your wild cards. We'll see in 2026. I think everybody's excited to see what you're going to talk about in 26. I know I am every year. Well, maybe you have to be by contract or something. But
I do not manufacture that excitement.
Thank you. Well, I'm happy for anything that maybe lets me off the hook a little bit. But yes, I mean, I think that's an interesting theory, and there's probably some truth to that. So.
All right. Well, listen, that's it for 2025. I always take the opportunity. Thank you for being my partner, Steve. Appreciate you. I really enjoy doing this with us, and many of our listeners hopefully do as well. That continues to grow. So it's a great undertaking. We'll be back next year, 2026, with season 12. If you can imagine, 12 seasons. We're 12 seasons in. So for now, let's leave it there.